The presidential election 131 days away, and if primary day is any indication of the problems voters will face casting their ballot, the New York City Board of Elections has a lot of work to do. New York City Public Advocate Jumaane Williams joining me now to talk about some of the voting issues and what is being done to address them. Good morning to you, Public Advocate. Thanks for joining us.
Good morning. Good morning.
You know, Mr. Williams, it seems like every election, talk about the Board of Elections and how they just cannot seem to get it right. We're hearing reports this time of people waiting up to 2 to 3 hours in line to vote on Tuesday. Lefrak City, the lines were snaked around the block. Was the Board of Elections once again just not prepared?
We were getting complaints even well before that about people not getting their absentee ballots. They're not sure if it was being returned properly. And I would say this, we have to remember that we're in the middle of a global pandemic. And so I know that the Board of Elections were working with much less tools than they usually have. At the same time, as with most things in this pandemic, what it did was expose problems that already existed. And as you mentioned, we were having these issues for a very long time. And we have to make sure that we get it right now because there's going to be exponentially more people coming out in November.
How? In your view, how does that problem get fixed, especially by November, because this is a big election?
Well, one, we have to make sure going forward that the changes that were made in the absentee ballots are made permanent, because we have to make sure people get used to doing these things. If they were used to it, we might have seen some change. And the second is there has to be resources put into here. The poll workers need additional training, and that has to start right now. And lastly, we have to make sure everybody is speaking to each other. We had complaints of people not getting to be able to open the polls properly because the trains weren't running. And so we have to make sure all these kinks and these communications are happening and the resources are being put from now. We have to make sure that the machines that needed an update for certain things get validated for now, from now. We have to start right now. And that's the concern. Oftentimes we're waiting to the last minute to put these things into effect. And we need Albany just to respond, to act, put the resources in, and get the stuff moving.
We had some of the candidates on yesterday talking about how they heard of issues as well. And as of right now, only 100,000 absentee ballots have been counted, leaving more than 500,000 more to go. So in your expert opinion here, how long is this process actually going to take? And how can we ensure that with the problems we saw, that it's actually being handled properly?
Well, I'm still trying to actually get the numbers of the absentee ballots that were sent in. I'm not sure if it's necessarily that high. We know 700,000 were sent out. I'm waiting to get the number of that were returned. But I do think it's going to take a couple of weeks. And there were some of these races were very close. But everybody's right to make sure that we don't say anything definitively until every last vote is counted.
You know, you were on the Voter Assistance Advisory Committee. So just briefly tell me how that committee works and what it actually does.
I mean, the charter mandates that there's a voter advisory committee that advises people on what's going on with elections, how to get out and vote, and how to just educate voters. And that works very closely with the CFB, not necessarily the Board of Elections, but it is a good place to get this information out. But what we need right now is some changes in the laws permanently, additional resources to train poll workers, and to make sure every part of this city and state is talking to each other so this can happen seamlessly.
Very good. I want to shift to some other hot topics making headlines this morning, Public Advocate. A new report out claims that the city underreported police-involved deaths for years. From 2010 to 2015, the city claimed the number killed by police was 46, but the report more than doubles that number. In fact, you tweeted out yesterday that the administration has misinformed New York City about so much that was made. That's what made this report so jarring, was the belief that above all else, with data you couldn't hide death. So you said it was disturbingly wrong here. What else do you think should be done in terms of this administration to make it more transparent?
You know, very rarely am I speechless. I was pretty speechless here. We all look at this data and people skew things left, right. And there was always an assumption that, death was one thing we were all looking at and knowing that it was a right number because it's hard to hide. This administration has hid information. Previously, I mentioned the lead paint with NYPD, and so I'm very concerned as we have to move forward in this conversation that there's a lack of trust, and it's a problem. So we do want to see the whole report and all the supporting documents, and my office has requested that information from the DOH, and we expect to see it soon. And the racial breakdown was very disturbing as well.
And speaking of trust, that is something the NYPD is really working to improve upon right now. And that's the topic of conversation. A lot happening, from moving money out of the budget to the quick suspension of officers accused of wrongdoing, the releasing of body camera video. Now they're wiping the slate clean at Community Affairs with a new commissioner being named, Chief Jeffrey Madry, to head the bureau there. So do you know him, and your take on these changes?
I know Chief Madry very well. I think it's a very welcome Chief Madry in that position. It's an awesome change. I think he's the right person for the job, as long as we remember that this is not about a community affairs unit. This is not about shifting around some pieces. This is a wholesale change on what public safety is, what public safety isn't. Within that, what police should be used for, accountability and transparency. So as long as we keep that conversation going forward in earnest, then it's fine. But if we're trying to do that in exchange for those real important conversations, we're not going to move as far as we think.
Understood. Public Advocate, I appreciate your time this morning, as always, for joining us here on PIX11. Thank you.
Thank you.